Alder Ridge Trail does not look dangerous. It has no cliffs, no sudden drops, and no chaotic weather patterns. Families walk its first mile every summer. School groups visit in early fall. On maps, it appears as one of the simplest routes in western Montana, a gentle path rising slowly toward a quiet ridge. Yet for nearly 20 years, experienced hikers have stepped onto this trail and never returned. Their belongings were found clean and untouched. Their devices stopped recording mid-function. Search teams walked the corridor hundreds of times without discovering tracks, debris, or signs of struggle. Even the forest itself behaves strangely here. Sound fades, wind pauses, and wildlife moves around the trail rather than through it. This documentary follows each quiet detail, each subtle pattern, and each unanswered report leading toward the same narrow stretch of land, a place that records presence, but not passage. The trail that never seemed threatening, the path known as Alder Ridge Trail, sits on the northern edge of Pine County, a quiet part of western Montana, where the forest appears gentle and calm. Most visitors describe the trail as simple, wide, and steady, with almost no steep climbs. Rangers say it is one of the least demanding routes in the region. Families use it during weekends. Local schools send students there for short nature walks. Yet, since 2004, 8 experienced hikers have vanished while moving along its first 3 miles, a stretch that requires only about an hour to finish. Their cases are scattered across different years, but all share the same limited zone, the same lack of clear evidence, and the same steady silence that surrounds the area today. The first disappearance took place on the 18th of May, 2004. The hiker was a 7-year-old firefighter from Spokane named Daniel Price. He was known for long endurance runs and navigation work during wildfire seasons. Daniel parked his truck near the main pullout at 7:42 a.m., according to a timestamp from the check-in kiosk. A couple from Missoula said they saw him adjusting his pack and tying his bootlaces before he stepped onto the trail. The couple followed only 10 minutes later, walking at an easy pace. They reached the first bend and saw no one ahead. When they reached the second clearing, they said the forest felt still, like nothing was moving, though they thought little of it. Daniel's truck remained in the lot by evening. Search teams spent 6 days looking for him. No item of clothing, no boot print, and no radio clip was ever found. 2 years later, on the 3rd of September 2006, a biologist named Karen Holt disappeared while conducting a bird survey for the University of Montana. She carried a GPS unit that sent location points every 5 minutes. Her last transmission came from a spot known as Pine Notch, a narrow rise with a clear view of the valley. The reading showed she was moving at a normal pace. The next data point never arrived. When rescuers reached the area, they found her clipboard lying beside the trail. It had one handwritten line at the top of the page. Wind changed at 11:14. Her pack, camera, and jeeps were not there. The page showed no sign of tearing or water damage. Her students recalled her calm approach to fieldwork. She had told them once, "If you slow down enough, the forest speaks." Her disappearance introduced the first sense of unease among the academic community. The third case involved a retired ranger named Stephen Collins in July 2009. Stephen had spent 30 years working across multiple parks and knew the region well. He visited Alder Ridge Trail that morning for what he called a routine stretch of the legs. His neighbor said Stephen left at 6:30 a.m. and planned to return by noon. His dog waited at home. Rangers found Stephen's vehicle locked, with his walking stick in the back seat. A note on the dashboard read, 2 hours, maybe 3. A volunteer group traced the trail for almost a week. A few branches showed recent breaks about half a mile beyond Pine Notch, but the pattern did not match animal movement. Photographs taken during the search show the forest floor unusually bare, as though small debris had been brushed away. None of the searchers could explain it. On the 22nd of August 2011, 2 brothers, Mark and Joseph Connors, hiked the trail together. Both had extensive outdoor training from the Air Force Reserve. They kept a steady walking rhythm and maintained radio contact with their father, who waited at the trailhead. At 10:17 a.m., Mark reported that they were approaching the small footbridge over Alder Creek. At 10:23 a.m., Joseph said they heard something like a long crack deeper in the trees. When their father tried to call again at 10:31 a.m., no reply came. Rangers reached the footbridge 20 minutes later and found no sign of the brothers. The area bore no drag marks, no prints, and no unusual soil disturbance. Their packs and jackets were later located on an overlook a quarter mile north, neatly placed on the ground, side by side. For a while, the disappearances slowed. Hikers continued using the trail, though with more caution. Then, on the 4th of June 2015, a 62-year-old geologist named Howard Lane went missing after telling his wife he wanted to inspect a rock outcrop near the first ridge. Howard often joked that Alder Ridge Trail was as calm as a library aisle. His last known photo, taken by another hiker at 9:06 a.m., shows him standing with a sun hat in his hand. He is smiling and pointing toward a line of spruce. Weather reports noted stable air and mild temperatures that day. Howard's jacket was recovered 3 weeks later, wedged between two fallen logs far outside the original search perimeter. Rain had not yet touched it. Soil around the site looked disturbed in a narrow oval, as though something had pressed down gently and lifted again. During 2018, another hiker was involved in an incident that added a new detail. Her name was Maria Lopez, a wildlife photographer. She did not disappear, but she filed an unusual report. She described hearing a steady tone, almost like a low whistle behind the trees, near the start of mile 2. She said it lasted 3 seconds, stopped, then repeated once more. Maria left the trail immediately. A ranger accompanied her back to the area later that afternoon. Neither heard the sound again. Her report sits in Pine County's case file, with a short handwritten note from the reviewing officer. No mechanical source found. The most recent disappearance happened on the 12th of October 2021. The hiker was a former forestry student named Samuel Pierce. He walked the trail often and knew every bend. That morning, he left town at 7:10 a.m., telling a friend he wanted one last quiet walk before winter. Weather logs show low fog moving through the valley until about 9:30 a.m. Another hiker, an elderly man named Peter Benson, saw Samuel heading toward Pine Notch and greeted him with a simple "morning." According to Peter, Samuel smiled and lifted a hand. That was the last recorded contact. By afternoon, fog had cleared, but Samuel did not return. Search crews located a rolled-up map in a small hollow near the base of the ridge. It was dry and untouched. They found nothing else. Alder Ridge Trail still appears gentle. It still welcomes visitors with wide paths and open views. Yet, over almost 2 decades, it has become a place where people with strong skills, good equipment, and solid judgment have simply vanished. Rangers avoid speculation. Local residents share brief stories when asked, then grow quiet. The forest remains calm, steady, and unbroken, despite the unanswered questions that continue to gather around its first 3 miles. The patterns that did not match. When investigators reviewed the Alder Ridge files between 2004 and 2021, they expected to see scattered variables that lined up with common causes. Most trails associated with missing hikers show similarities involving weather shifts, steep terrain, sudden fatigue, or loss of direction. Alder Ridge Trail offered none of these usual markers. Instead, the cases formed a group of small, stable patterns that pointed away from random chance. Each detail appeared simple on its own, yet together they created a list that search leaders found difficult to explain. The first pattern involved distance. Every disappearance occurred within the same initial stretch of the trail, a zone just under 3 miles long. Rangers mapped the area and noted that the terrain remains almost unchanged through this entire section. Elevation rises only 220 feet over that distance. The slope is mild, the soil is firm, and the tree canopy stays open enough for sunlight to reach the ground for most of the day. Search teams marked each location where an item had been recovered, and the dots gathered into a narrow band between the first ridge and the Pine Notch overlook. A ranger named Charles Turner described it in a 2017 training meeting as a corridor without footholds. He meant it lacked the hazards that usually account for lost hikers. The second pattern appeared in the timestamps left behind by witnesses, cameras, or phone logs. Nearly all missing hikers entered the trail between 7 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. The timeline repeated across seasons and weather cycles. Morning fog was present in several cases, including those of Daniel Price in 2004 and Samuel Pierce in 2021. Yet fog in this region often has a predictable rhythm, thick before 9 a.m., then clearing by mid-morning. None of the search notes indicated heavy wind or rainfall in the hours when the hikers vanished. A retired meteorologist from Helena, named Ruth Wilkinson, examined the conditions for 3 of the cases and wrote, "Nothing suggests disorientation due to atmospheric change." Her comment remains part of the county file. A third pattern involved the lack of physical trace. The Connors brothers left their packs on the ground near a northern overlook. Karen Holt left her clipboard, but not her equipment. Samuel Pierce left only a map in a hollow. These items were found in clean, dry condition, suggesting either short exposure or careful placement. Search notes repeatedly reference the absence of typical disturbance: no scuff marks on tree bark, no bent saplings, and no displaced soil common in falls or animal contact. A volunteer team in 2009 recorded that the ground near Pine Notch showed less movement than expected for a high-traffic trail. Their photos show smooth soil even after 2 full days of search activity. The fourth pattern involved sound reports. Most witnesses described Alder Ridge Trail as unusually quiet. Even during months when small wildlife should be active, hikers mentioned hearing very little movement. A pair of researchers from Montana State University, who visited in 2012, wrote that the forest felt muted, though they heard no unusual tones. The only exception was Maria Lopez in 2018, who reported the low whistle rising from between the trees. Rangers documented her statement verbatim: sound repeated twice, equal spacing, no change in pitch. Her account is the only one of its kind. The fifth pattern centered on navigation tools. In several cases, Jeep's units, compasses, and phones showed no sign of malfunction before the hikers disappeared. Karen Holt's Jeeps transmitted normally until the moment it stopped. Searchers retrieved Samuel Pierce's phone logs and found no irregularities. Even when investigators tested compasses near the ridge, they detected no magnetic disturbance. A field note dated the 7th of June 2015 reads, "Compass stable at Notch. Needle remains steady." Another entry from that afternoon adds, "Radio channels clear. No interference." These records ruled out the type of electromagnetic disruption sometimes reported in remote areas. The sixth pattern related to the stability of the environment itself. Alder Ridge Trail has no major predators known to cause stealth removals. Pine County hosts black bears and mountain lions, but attacks leave signs. No tracks, hair samples, or drag marks appeared in any of the search reports. A wildlife officer named Dana Harrington reviewed the 2011 case of the Connors brothers and wrote, "Not consistent with lion strike. No ground disruption, no debris spread." Her analysis was repeated in 3 later cases. The seventh pattern involved the witnesses' final observations of the missing hikers. In every instance, the last recorded sighting described a normal pace, a calm posture, and no visible struggle. Daniel Price was tying his boots. Karen Holt was recording bird calls. The Connors brothers were talking over the radio with their father. Samuel Pierce greeted another hiker with a simple wave. None showed signs of urgency or confusion. Their final moments appeared consistent with routine movement. Investigators also examined map overlays created by search planners over the years. These overlays highlighted the precise points where hikers were last seen or where their belongings were located. A thin, curved line formed across the maps, beginning near the creek bridge and continuing north toward the first ridge. The line did not match watershed boundaries, old game trails, or known wind path. A ranger reviewing the overlays during a 2019 workshop remarked quietly, "It's as though the forest drew its own boundary." Another detail concerned the absence of long-term changes in vegetation. Usually, repeated search activity compacts soil, breaks branches, and alters the understory. Yet satellite photos comparing 2004, 2010, 2016, and 2021 show minimal difference along the corridor where the disappearances occurred. Growth appears steady, undisturbed, and uniform. A forestry consultant said during a 2020 review, "You would not know this area saw large-scale searches over nearly 20 years." His comment noted the lack of wear that should have resulted from hundreds of volunteers moving repeatedly over the same ground. These patterns do not lead toward a single explanation. They instead point toward a place where normal outdoor logic begins to feel incomplete. Experienced hikers walked the same easy trail, used by school groups and weekend visitors. They carried working equipment, moved through mild weather, and left almost no trace behind. Their cases fit together in a way that does not resemble common search and rescue incidents. The corridor remains open, quiet, and unchanged, even as the list of patterns continues to widen. The searches that yielded nothing. Search operations along Alder Ridge Trail followed standard protocols used across Montana and the greater northern Rockies. Crews expected to find clothing, footprints, broken brush, or any faint mark that could suggest direction. Instead, each mission ended with the same report: no trace recovered beyond the initial discovery site. Rangers described these searches as complete in method, incomplete in result. Over the years, the pattern became steady enough that new volunteers heard the same instructions at each briefing: even though the missing individuals changed and the seasons shifted around them. The first large-scale search took place after Daniel Price vanished. On the 18th of May 2004, Pine County requested assistance from the Regional Search and Rescue Team based in Missoula. They organized grid lines stretching from the parking area to the start of the ridge. Aerial support came from a county helicopter equipped with a thermal camera, but mild spring temperatures reduced the usefulness of heat signatures. Teams swept the ground with 2 canine handlers, moving in slow, even passes. The dogs showed brief interest near a small stand of fir trees, but lost the scent within minutes. A responder noted in his log, dated May 20, trail surface too smooth for print retention. Another wrote, no off-trail disturbance found within primary zone. After 6 days, all teams withdrew. 2 years later, after biologist Karen Holt vanished on the 3rd of September 2006, the search began within hours of her missing GPS signal. Her colleagues provided her planned survey route, which followed a simple loop through Pine Notch. Search leaders marked her last known point with an orange flag. From there, they expanded outward in concentric patterns. The clipboard she left behind sat in plain view beside the trail, suggesting she placed it deliberately or dropped it without force. Yet the ground around the clipboard showed no marks. A volunteer photographed the soil from several angles to check for shallow impressions. None appeared. The search radius extended to 15 miles, including creek beds, hidden depressions, and rock outcrops. All areas yielded clean earth. The search for retired ranger Stephen Collins in July 2009 introduced new expectations, as many searchers believed Stephen would have followed safety protocol even if injured. They expected to find cut branches or trail markers he would have placed to guide rescuers. They found none. A helicopter with side observers ran slow passes across the ridge, focusing on tree breaks that might indicate a fall. Nothing matched. One forestry technician recalled, the canopy looked untouched. No stress marks, no recent fractures. Ground teams walked shoulder to shoulder across long stretches of understory where the soil remained smooth. In a 2009 report, a lead ranger wrote, area condition suggests no struggle. The search lasted 8 days. The Connors brothers' disappearance in 2011 prompted one of the largest operations in Pine County history. Their Air Force Reserve training meant they understood navigation and emergency signaling. Crews expected to find footprints, especially near the northern overlook where the brothers' packs were discovered side by side. Yet the soil beneath the packs appeared undisturbed, as though the bags had been placed gently rather than dropped. Rangers examined tree trunks, moss patches, and small gullies. Nothing indicated movement. Canine units searched the entire corridor twice. Both teams returned with no sustained scent trail. Radio repeaters placed along the ridge recorded no interference. A search log entry dated August 26 stated, ground sweep negative, aerial sweep negative, canine sweep negative. After 9 days, operations scaled back. The 2015 search for geologist Howard Lane brought new tools, including high-resolution aerial imaging. Drones scanned the ridge and creek zones, capturing hundreds of photographs in calm summer light. Analysts compared the images to older satellite records and found no visible changes, no newly overturned logs, no exposed soil patches, no broken branches indicating forced movement. When Howard's jacket was found outside the predicted radius, crews returned to the field, expecting to find further trace nearby. The surrounding soil formed a smooth oval impression, puzzling investigators. A ranger wrote, impression shallow, uniform, lacking direction. Without prints or debris, teams widened the boundary once again. No further evidence appeared. The near incident with photographer Maria Lopez in 2018 triggered a smaller search, not for a missing person, but for the source of the low whistle, she reported. Rangers walked the stretch of trail between miles 1 and 2, testing possible causes, wind moving through hollow trunks, distant machinery, or bird calls. They heard nothing. A ranger struck several standing dead trees with a mallet to see if they resonated. None produced a tone similar to Maria's description. The absence of mechanical equipment ruled out common explanations. The search ended quietly. When Samuel Pierce went missing in October 2021, the search spanned early morning through late night for 10 consecutive days. Teams used thermal imaging, infrared cameras, and wide-area drones. Fog complicated the first 24 hours, but conditions cleared quickly. Samuel's rolled-up map in the hollow was dry, suggesting minimal exposure to moisture. Crews documented the site thoroughly before widening their perimeter. They moved through narrow channels, brush-heavy slopes, and low cedar groves. Nothing indicated Samuel's path beyond the point where he greeted another hiker. A field journal entry from October 14 reads, "Trail surface intact, no compression or drift in soil." By the 8th day, volunteers walked ground already covered multiple times. Still nothing surfaced. Through all these search efforts, one detail remained consistent. The natural landscape showed little response to disturbance. Trails with heavy foot traffic usually display broken needles, shallow scuffs, or changes in the spread of loose debris. On Alder Ridge, these signs were almost absent. Even after hundreds of searchers worked the same 3-mile section for nearly 2 decades, the environment remained remarkably unchanged. Aerial comparisons show the same contours, the same green density, and the same smooth understory. A search coordinator in 2020 remarked, "The forest returns to form faster than expected, or it never shows the interruption in the first place." Attempts to investigate underground features, such as sinkholes or hidden crevices, produced no leads. Geological surveys showed stable bedrock with minimal void spaces. Crews used metal probes in multiple locations and found no drops or concealed openings. Water tests along Alder Creek revealed steady flow and unaltered stream beds. Each study concluded that the land offered no hidden threats. In the end, the searches revealed the same quiet puzzle. Hikers disappeared in a stable environment where signs should exist, yet do not. No drag marks, footprints, broken brush, or disturbed soil. No clothing fibers caught on branches. No scent trails lasting more than a few minutes. The corridor remained clean, composed, and silent each time. Search teams return when new cases arise, but the trail offers no guidance. It remains a place where the methods used elsewhere, methods proven effective across forests and mountains, continue to yield nothing at all. The trail's unchanging silence. Visitors often describe Alder Ridge Trail as calm, but those who return year after year note a quieter quality that stands apart from normal forest conditions. It is not the peaceful quiet found in high valleys or early morning meadows. Instead, it is a steady absence of movement, an environment where sound seems to hold its place. This silence does not rise or fall with the seasons. It remains the same through spring, summer, and early autumn, as though the forest along those first 3 miles has settled into its own form of stillness. Most hikers expect to hear small wildlife moving through brush. Pine County forests usually carry the noises of chipmunks running across logs, sparrows rattling in low branches, and insects moving over dry needles. Yet hikers, moving through Alder Ridge Trail, often report hearing none of these. The absence appears most noticeable between Mile 1 and Pine Notch. A birder named Thomas Green noted during a 2013 visit, "No calls observed during peak morning hours." His journal included a short line, "Area too quiet for late June." Rangers have also commented on the muted atmosphere. During a training exercise in 2014, 2 new staff members accompanied Ranger Dana Harrington on a standard patrol. Harrington later wrote in her daily log, "No canopy rustle, no understory motion, air still despite open ridge." She checked wind readings from the small anemometer near the trailhead. The device recorded mild gusts moving through the valley, but the trees along the trail showed almost no response. Leaves hung steady, even while the ridge above swayed. Researchers visiting the area found similar conditions. In 2017, a student group from Montana State University conducted a wildlife activity study along 4 local trails. They placed audio recorders to capture sound patterns. Alder Ridge was one of the test sites. The equipment collected 48 hours of audio. The recordings showed steady quiet, with brief interruptions from distant crows, but almost no nearby movement. A faculty member reviewing the files wrote, "Sound distribution unnaturally flat, minimal variation in close-range activity." Wind patterns have drawn attention as well. Usually, the ridge channels light breezes toward the trail, creating small drafts. Yet multiple hikers have described experiencing uneven airflow, where wind moves strongly at the trailhead but weakens once they enter the corridor. A visitor named Rebecca Lyons described it in a report from 2019. "Wind stopped as soon as I passed the first bend. Shirt collar stayed still. Pine tips did not move." She noted that the breeze returned only after she turned back toward the parking area. Another environmental note involves Alder Creek. Most streams in the region produce steady sound patterns, rushing water during snowmelt, trickling flows during late summer. But hikers passing over the small footbridge report that the creek's sound often feels distant, even when they stand directly above it. Several searchers in 2011 mentioned that the creek seemed muted during the search for the Connors brothers. A note in the field log reads, "Water level normal, sound dampened." Rangers tested the wooden boards to check if the bridge absorbed vibration. Results did not explain the reduced volume. Wildlife monitoring, placed along Alder Ridge Trail, has also shown unusual gaps. Motion cameras installed in 2018 recorded only a handful of animals over a 2-month period, even though surrounding forests showed regular activity. A black bear appeared once, moving quickly across the frame. A deer passed twice during early morning hours. Otherwise, the cameras captured empty forest. A biologist reviewing the footage wrote, "Area supports wildlife. Low activity, inconsistent with habitat quality." She noted that the understory contained fresh growth and adequate food sources, yet animals seemed to avoid lingering. Hikers in recent years have also mentioned a faint pressure in the air, though not in a physical or harmful sense. Instead, they describe a light heaviness, similar to the atmosphere before a distant storm. This feeling appears most commonly near Mile 2. A backpacker named Michael Lane wrote in a public forum in 2020, "Forest felt still, air thicker, could not explain." His description matched earlier reports from other visitors, though none linked the sensation to any weather phenomenon. A ranger named Ellen Trask kept a detailed log during routine patrols in 2020 and 2021. She walked Alder Ridge Trail twice a week, recording tree health, trail condition, and wildlife sightings. Her entries frequently mention the silence. On July 8, she wrote, "No birds calling at 8:10 a.m. On July 15, she wrote, "Canopy motion absent despite forecast wind." On August 2, she noted, "Insects nearly silent along corridor." She did not record similar observations on other trails within her patrol rotation. Another environmental observation came from a retired geologist who visited the area in 2021. He noted that echoes produced by clapping or speaking aloud seemed softer than expected. He wrote, "Sound dispersion higher than normal, no return pattern from ridge wall." His observation was unusual, as the ridge's natural shape should create mild echoes. Researchers studying forest acoustics suggested that tree density might be absorbing sound, but measurements taken during fieldwork showed density similar to other parts of the valley. No structural differences in soil or canopy explained the muted environment. Despite the steady silence, some visitors report brief interruptions that occur without warning. These are not sudden noises, but momentary shifts, small gusts of wind lasting only seconds, a single rustle in the brush, or faint cracking sounds that do not repeat. A hiker in 2018 described hearing one short snap, like a stick breaking under light pressure. She looked for the source, but found no movement. The silence along Alder Ridge does not behave like a normal quiet zone. It does not fluctuate with wildlife cycles, visitor numbers, or weather shifts. Instead, it remains consistent in its stillness, as though the forest has set a narrow boundary around the first 3 miles of trail and holds that boundary in place. Search leaders reviewing past cases often refer to this silence indirectly. In a meeting transcript from 2019, a ranger said, "You expect noise when there's nothing wrong." His remark reflected the strange pattern noticed by both investigators and casual visitors. The trail's silence has become one of its most defining features, even though it offers no clear explanation for the disappearances. Alder Ridge Trail remains open to the public. Hikers continue to visit, though many now walk with greater awareness. They report the same quiet, the same stillness, and the same sense of sound being held at a distance. The silence remains steady, unbroken, and unchanged year after year. The maps that raised questions. When investigators reviewed Alder Ridge's historical maps, they expected to find precise alignment between old surveys and modern trail charts. Most routes in Pine County have changed only slightly over the years, with adjustments made for erosion or seasonal flooding. Alder Ridge Trail, however, showed a more subtle kind of shift, small changes in placement that did not match the physical terrain. These discrepancies did not appear large enough to influence navigation, yet they created a quiet uncertainty about how the trail had been documented across 4 decades. The earliest detailed map of the region came from a 1981 forestry survey. This map outlined the trail's first 3 miles, with a narrow line running parallel to Alder Creek. The route description noted slight elevation rise and stable ground. When modern rangers compared this map to current GPS-rendered versions, they noticed that the 1981 path sat several yards east of the present-day trail in one section near Pine Notch. This difference was not noted in any official update log, A ranger reviewing the alignment said, "Trail appears to have shifted without record. No formal reroute was documented." A second map from 1993, produced by a state conservation project, recorded the same section of trail but placed the path slightly west of the earlier chart. Again, no agency record explained this adjustment. Surveyors had labelled the terrain as unchanged since last evaluation, yet the plotted line on the map did not match the 1981 version or the modern track. The discrepancies measured only a few yards, but they remained consistent across multiple printings. A retired cartographer who examined the archives in 2019 commented, "Margin of error too small to be random." Investigators then turned to aerial images from 1999. These photographs showed a faint trail line that appeared straight and uninterrupted. When overlaid with the 1981 and 1993 maps, the faint line fell between the two recorded positions. It suggested neither chart matched the trail's actual placement at the time. The inconsistency puzzled reviewers. A ranger noted 3 versions of the same path, none aligning with terrain markers. The comment was added to the internal record. Further examination revealed another odd detail. The contour lines near the first ridge appeared slightly different on maps printed before 2000 compared to those printed after 2005. The physical ridge itself had not changed. Rock formations remained stable, yet the spacing of elevation markers shifted. On older maps, the ridge slope appeared more gradual. On newer maps, it appeared steeper. Both sets referenced the same elevation points, but the slope representation varied. A geologist reviewing these maps wrote, "Elevation data unchanged, representation inconsistent." His note was brief, offering no speculation. Investigators also reviewed an archived boundary survey from 2004, produced just months before the disappearance of Daniel Price. This survey included a hand-drawn sketch indicating a narrow depression near the turn toward Mile 2. The sketch showed a small dip in the ground that did not appear on any other map before or after. A ranger team visited the site in 2020 to compare the drawing with the actual terrain. They found no depression. The ground ran smooth and level. If the dip had existed, natural processes would have left some sign, but they found none. GPS data taken from hikers between 2010 and 2021 added another layer of uncertainty. Tracks collected from smartphones and handheld units showed the trail following a slightly curved line east of some printed maps. When analysts overlaid the GPS tracks from 15 hikers, the lines gathered into a narrow band, but not one that matched older records. Analysts labelled the chart variation typical, but alignment mismatch persistent. The phrase alignment mismatch appeared in later reviews as well. Another issue arose when cartographers compared creek measurements over time. Alder Creek's documented position remained almost identical across all surveys. Its flow patterns and bedrock anchors ensured stability, yet several maps placed the trail closer to the creek than it actually runs today. Measurements taken in 2021 showed the trail standing at least 15 feet farther from the creek than maps from 1981 suggested. No erosion or flooding history supported the idea of trail relocation. Rangers found no evidence of construction or rerouting equipment used in the area. Maps produced for hikers from 2010 onward included simplified diagrams showing only major bends. These diagrams placed Pine Notch slightly south of its true location. When questioned, the regional map publisher stated, "Simplified for clarity, not intended for precision." However, even the simplified diagrams contained features not found in the terrain. One edition showed a minor fork near Mile 1, though no such fork existed. Another depicted a small clearing near the ridge that search teams never located. Historical land use records added another strange detail. A 1979 land parcel document listed the Alder Ridge corridor as undeveloped, moderate wildlife presence. Yet a 1992 version described the same land as having low wildlife density. The change suggested that animal movement reduced over time, but it did not explain why maps showed shifting trail positions. When wildlife biologists reviewed the documents, they found no corresponding notes about habitat disruption or human activity that might have caused changes in animal distribution. In 2016, a staff member at Pine County's survey office attempted to create a comprehensive overlay combining all available maps from 1981 1981 through 2015. When placed together, the lines formed a narrow swath of varying positions. The overlay resembled a cluster of parallel threads, drifting slightly but repeatedly from one map to another. The staff member wrote a short remark at the bottom of the sheet. Trail appears fixed in reality, but flexible in records. Investigators noted that these discrepancies did not directly explain the disappearances. They did not suggest dangerous terrain or hidden drops. Instead, they raised questions about how the trail had been charted and how small changes repeated over decades without explanation. The maps did not contradict the forest, they simply failed to agree with one another. Alder Ridge Trail remains documented on modern charts as a simple, stable route, yet its mapped history shows slight movements, adjusted contours, and subtle inconsistencies that have never been resolved. These map variations have become another quiet detail in a larger pattern, one that grows more noticeable each time investigators compare past and present records. The witnesses who saw nothing. Across nearly 2 decades of disappearances on Alder Ridge Trail, several people stood close enough within minutes or sometimes only steps to observe something that might explain what happened. Yet every recorded account shares an identical quality: the absence of anything unusual at the moment just before each hiker vanished. These witnesses did not describe movement, struggle, change in weather, or unexpected noise. Their statements instead form a quiet record of normal moments that ended without visible cause. One of the earliest witness accounts came from the couple who saw Daniel Price in 2004. They arrived shortly after he parked his truck at 7:42 a.m. They watched him adjust the shoulder strap on his pack and retire bootlace. The man later said, "Nothing seemed strange. He looked calm. Trail looked normal." The couple entered the trail only 10 minutes later. They expected to see Daniel ahead, but they found the path empty. Their statement noted no sound of footsteps, no rustling in nearby brush, and no other hikers in sight. The next clear account came from 2 graduate students working with biologist Karen Holt in 2006. They spent the morning sorting field notes at a campsite a short distance from the trail. Karen passed them at approximately 10:50 a.m. carrying her equipment. One student said she greeted them with a simple wave and continued without stopping. When Karen's GPS stopped transmitting 24 minutes later, neither student recalled any unusual noise during that period. They described the morning as quiet, steady, normal. In interviews, both repeated the same phrase: nothing out of place. Retired Ranger Stephen Collins had no direct witnesses along the trail, but his neighbor spoke with him minutes before he left home. She recalled him in good spirits, mentioning no concern about the weather or terrain. A local jogger passed the trailhead around 7 a.m. and saw Stephen's parked car, but did not see him on the path. The jogger described the forest as still, but not in a worrying way, a phrase that appeared later in the incident report. More detailed accounts came after the disappearance of the Connors brothers in 2011. Their father maintained radio contact with them during the hike. His final conversation captured no stress or confusion in their voices. Mark reported, "Crossing bridge, clear path, no issues." Joseph's final words described a single, sharp sound, something like a long crack. He did not repeat the statement or elaborate. When investigators questioned the father, he emphasized that his sons sounded calm. He said, "Nothing in their tone suggested trouble." A couple hiking near the trailhead later that morning reported hearing no unusual sounds coming from the ridge. During the 2015 case of geologist Howard Lane, another hiker photographed him at 9:06 a.m., noting the brief encounter. In her statement, she said, "He smiled, pointed toward the trees, seemed relaxed." She continued her hike and did not see him again. When questioned, she mentioned the trail appeared quieter than usual, but she did not associate the silence with anything concerning. She heard no calls for help, no motion in brush, and no wildlife activity. In 2018, photographer Maria Lopez provided one of the few accounts containing an unusual detail. She did not see anything visually out of place, but she heard the low whistle rising from beyond the trees. Her report was precise, a 3-second tone, a pause, then another tone of the same length. Rangers questioned her about direction, pitch, and possible echoes. She stated, "Sound seemed close, but location unclear." When she left the area, she did not see any figure, animal, or object that could have produced it. Her account remains unique in that it contains a sound event rather than silence. The most recent disappearance, involving forestry student Samuel Pierce in October 2021, produced the clearest final witness statement. An elderly hiker, named Peter Benson, spoke briefly with Samuel near mile 1. Peter said Samuel appeared relaxed, walking at a steady pace. He recalled Samuel looking toward the ridge and giving a short wave. Peter described no wind at that moment and no other hikers nearby. He did not hear anything unusual before or after their meeting. When asked if he saw any movement in the trees, he replied, "No movement at all. Forest was still." Later that morning, a pair of backpackers entered the trail about 30 minutes after Samuel. They walked to Pine Notch without seeing him. Both reported the same impression: quiet forest, empty path. Their description matched earlier testimony from other visitors, the same consistent stillness, the same absence of visible activity. Rangers also serve as witnesses through routine patrol logs. Their observations provide an ongoing record rather than a single moment in time. Ranger Ellen Trask wrote in August 2020, "No hikers beyond bend, though 2 cars in lot." Ranger Harrington wrote in 2014, "Sound carries oddly, no echo return." These statements do not describe disappearance events directly, but they reinforce a consistent environmental pattern, a trail where stillness feels continuous rather than situational. Locals who used the trail occasionally added brief statements to public forums or visitor journals. A man from Pine Valley wrote in 2013, "Trail always feels empty, even when cars are in parking area." A teacher who brought students for a short walk in 2016 noted, "Children spoke quietly without being asked." She said the quiet felt natural, not strange, but her note was later included in a ranger review due to its similarity to other remarks about the area's atmosphere. Witnesses saw no shadows moving across the path, no sudden changes in tree movement, no signs of injury, and no disruptive events. Their accounts create a near-uniform narrative, normal encounters that ended without any visible cause for concern. Across 18 years, the people closest to the moments before each disappearance described calm conditions. Their observations do not explain what happened. They instead form a careful record of nothing seen, nothing heard, and nothing out-of-place moments that should have continued in predictable ways, but did not. The weather that didn't behave. Weather along Alder Ridge Trail has always been listed as mild, predictable, and steady. Pine County sits in a valley known for slow-moving systems, gentle wind cycles, and clear seasonal shifts. For most hikers, this kind of climate removes uncertainty. Forecasts rarely change suddenly, and temperature swings happen gradually. Yet, when investigators reviewed atmospheric logs tied to the disappearance dates, they found small but repeating irregularities, subtle changes in fog density, sudden pockets of cool air, and wind patterns that did not match the surrounding region. The first documented case occurred with the disappearance of Daniel Price in 2004. Weather reports for May 18 showed stable temperatures between 51 and 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds were recorded at 3 to 5 miles per hour. No storms approached the area. Yet a ranger, patrolling near the opposite ridge that morning, wrote in his log, "Sound travelled strangely. Could not hear creak, though standing near it." When investigators cross-referenced this with surrounding reports, no other part of the valley noted similar sound dampening. Satellite images taken that afternoon showed light cloud cover, but no unusual atmospheric activity. In 2006, when biologist Karen Holt vanished, the sky remained clear through most of the day. Students working with her reported calm air, steady light, and no approaching fronts. However, a weather monitor, operated by the State University, recorded a sudden humidity spike at 11:12 a.m. 2 minutes before Karen wrote, "Wind changed at 11 to 14 on her clipboard. The monitor recorded no increase in wind speed, only a shift in moisture that lasted 7 minutes before returning to baseline. Meteorologist Ruth Wilkinson, who later reviewed the data, wrote, "Shift does not match any known local pattern, likely microclimate anomaly." The term appeared again in later investigations. During the 2009 disappearance of retired ranger Stephen Collins, several search volunteers mentioned an unusual chill settling over the area despite warm July temperatures. One wrote, "Air cooled quickly along midsection of trail, not matched on ridge or valley floor." Rangers placed portable thermometers at various points along the trail during the search. These devices recorded a narrow drop of 4 degrees across a stretch no longer than 50 yards. The temperature returned to normal just beyond that point. Investigators labeled this zone Transient Cool Pocket A, but no cause was identified. Soil temperature readings showed no geothermal activity. The weather surrounding the disappearance of the Connors brothers in 2011 created further inconsistencies. Morning conditions were listed as stable. Fog was not predicted. Yet the father reported that his sons mentioned thin haze near the footbridge. When searchers arrived only 30 minutes after the brothers stopped responding, the haze had lifted completely. Cameras placed along the valley's western ridge recorded no fog bank moving into the area that day. Atmospheric scientist James Eddings reviewed the videos and noted no recorded event capable of producing localized haze. The short remark later appeared in the search file. Similar irregularities emerged in the 2015 disappearance of geologist Howard Lane. Although the day was sunny and warm, several hikers reported feeling a light breeze at the trailhead that vanished once they moved beyond the first bend. One hiker said, "Air stood still like a room with closed windows." When investigators examined wind charts, they found that the ridge recorded consistent movement, while the valley floor recorded minimal movement. The trail, positioned between these zones, should have reflected a blend of the two patterns. Instead, it displayed nearly complete stillness. A ranger comparing the charts wrote, "Trail sits inside dead wind pocket, unexplained by terrain." The 2018 incident, involving photographer Maria Lopez, produced a more specific anomaly. The low whistle she described occurred on a day with steady but gentle wind patterns. Meteorological logs recorded wind direction shifting slightly between southwest and west from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Maria heard the sound near mile 2, but when rangers returned later in the afternoon, wind measurements showed uniform direction with no sudden shifts. Maria noted that the whistle did not match natural wind movement. She said, "Tone was even, not shaped by gust." Investigators could not reproduce the sound despite multiple attempts in varying conditions. When forestry student Samuel Pierce disappeared in 2021, fog reports created another inconsistency. Forecasts predicted low morning fog in the valley, dissipating by 9 a.m. Satellite photos confirmed fog across Pine County until mid-morning. Yet hikers on Alder Ridge reported thicker fog than expected fog that one described as hanging lower than normal, and another described as moving slowly like it didn't want to rise. By the time search teams arrived, the fog had cleared completely. A ranger wrote, "Fog vanished at trail faster than in other parts of valley. Temperature markers placed along the ridge showed rapid warming in the corridor, despite slower warming in surrounding forest." Investigators also noted irregularities in the trail's wind exposure. Usually, ridges act as channels for airflow, creating intermittent gusts. But several hikers across different years reported long stretches of absolute stillness. A backpacker in 2017 wrote, "Trees didn't sway, felt like air paused." In other parts of Pine County, wind readings adjusted normally throughout the day, yet the Alder Ridge corridor remained still for hours. Fog behavior became one of the most frequently cited atmospheric anomalies. Trees normally collect moisture that rolls upward as fog lifts, creating droplets along branches. Rangers who monitored the trail during a fog event in 2019 noticed that branches near mile 2 stayed dry, while branches further down were wet. One ranger recorded, "Fog here did not interact with canopy." Another wrote, "Moisture behaves unevenly." These details, although small, repeated across multiple reports. Sunlight patterns also drew attention. Hikers noted that shadows along the first mile often appeared softer than expected. A researcher comparing light measurements from 2012 and 2020 found that ambient brightness remained consistent with forecasts, yet shadow edge clarity appeared reduced in camera images. He wrote, "Light diffused without atmospheric justification." No conclusions were drawn, but the entry was added to the environmental file. Temperature layering added another clue. A study conducted in 2020 placed sensors at 3 heights: ground level, waist level, and shoulder level. Researchers expected gradual temperature differences. Instead, readings taken near Pine Notch showed a cooler layer at waist height, surrounded by warmer air above and below. The pattern lasted for 8 minutes before equalizing. The field leader wrote, "Inversion band too narrow, too transient." No other trail in the valley produced similar readings during the study period. The weather data show no storms, no lightning, no sudden temperature crashes, and no high winds linked to the disappearances. Instead, they reveal a corridor where weather behaves subtly out of rhythm fog that lingers or rises unevenly, silence that grows thicker despite expected airflow, temperatures that shift across narrow bands, and wind that stops at the trail's edge despite moving freely only yards away. These irregularities do not form a dramatic pattern. They do not indicate danger or signal clear atmospheric instability. They form something quieter, small deviations in otherwise calm conditions, deviations that repeat, pause, and repeat again across years of reports. The dogs that refused the trail. When search teams deployed canine units along Alder Ridge Trail, they expected the dogs to behave as they had on dozens of previous missions: nose down, tail steady, following scent with quiet focus. Instead, handlers documented patterns that were subtle at first, then increasingly difficult to ignore. Across nearly 20 years, dogs from different agencies, trained under different programs, showed the same reactions in the same portion of the trail: hesitation, loss of trail interest, and in several cases, full refusal to continue forward. The earliest canine record came from the 2004 search for Daniel Price. 2 dogs were brought from Missoula the morning after Daniel's truck was found. Handlers led them along the first mile of the trail, expecting to pick up scent easily from boot tracks or shed skin cells. Both animals located a faint line of scent near the trailhead. They followed it for several minutes, then stopped at a narrow bend near a stand of young spruce. One handler wrote, "Dog paused, circled twice, then sat facing the trees." Attempts to re-engage the dog failed. When brought back to the scent line, it followed for several yards, then stopped again. The second dog behaved almost identically. Neither pulled forward, neither signaled a trail direction, and neither showed signs of distress. They simply stopped working. 2 years later, during the search for biologist Karen Holt, canine units were deployed within hours. Her jeeps confirmed a recent location, making scent recovery likely. Yet her assigned dog tracked her footprint pattern only along the first section of the trail. At Pine Notch, the dog lifted its head, walked in a small half circle, and returned to the exact spot where it had paused. The handler's log noted, "Scent appears to terminate rather than disperse. Normally, scent trails weaken gradually. Here, the scent ended sharply, without drift to either side." A second dog brought in that afternoon showed the same pattern, following confidently until the notch, then stopping as though the trail had been removed. During the 2009 search for retired ranger Stephen Collins, canine behavior became more unusual. One dog, known for strong cold tracking skills, refused to enter the first wooded corridor after the parking area. The handler tried 3 times, but the dog remained planted, staring down the path without stepping forward. A substitute dog entered the corridor but slowed significantly, sniffing with uncertainty before stopping entirely near the same small spruce cluster identified in 2004. A search volunteer recorded the moment. Dog's posture stiff, ears forward, tail held low. Not fear, more like uncertainty. Handlers reported no external stimuli such as predators, strong odors, or sudden noises. The Connors brothers' disappearance in 2011 provided one of the clearest examples. Multiple canine teams attempted to track the brothers' route from the footbridge toward the overlook. All dogs followed the scent to the creek crossing. Beyond that point, each dog displayed avoidance behavior, pulling sideways off the trail, hesitating, or attempting to return to the footbridge. One dog refused to step onto the far side of the bridge entirely, bracing against the pull of the leash. A handler with 20 years of field experience wrote, "I've seen dogs refuse for fear or injury, but never for neutral ground with no threat signal." Another noted that the scent stopped, as if lifted vertically. In 2015, during the search for geologist Howard Lane, handlers documented a new detail. Dogs picked up Howard's scent from the parking area and carried it through the first bend. At mile 1, both dogs paused in the same spot, looked upward, and then sat. This vertical attention did not match typical scent tracking behavior. Handlers checked wind direction, but found no upward drafts. The dogs did not bark, whine, or show agitation. They simply ended the track. When guides attempted to lead them farther, the dogs resisted not aggressively, but with steady weight against the harness. The 2018 incident with photographer Maria Lopez, though not a disappearance, involved canine support meant to identify the source of the low whistle she reported. Handlers walked dogs along the corridor to check for hidden animals, dens, or injured wildlife. Both dogs behaved normally at first, then slowed near mile 2. Instead of searching outward toward the tree line, they stayed close to the trail, walking short, careful steps. Neither raised its nose toward the air to test for scent, a behavior dogs typically use in open spaces. The handler noted, both dogs working close to ground despite no ground scent, unusual. The most documented canine anomalies came during the 2021 search for forestry student Samuel Pierce. Multiple dogs from 2 counties joined the search. Every dog showed a variation of the same behavior, tracking confidently until near the midpoint of the corridor, then stopping. One dog traced a small circle, then lay down facing the ridge. Another walked several yards off the trail, sniffed lightly, and returned without committing to a direction. A third dog made a brief, uncertain pull toward a cluster of ferns, then abandoned the motion. Handlers reported no distraction, no environmental trigger, and no contamination that would interfere with scent. Across all cases, dogs displayed no panic, no aggression, and no signs of physiological distress. Their refusals were quiet, consistent, and calm. The pattern repeated across different breeds, training programs, and weather conditions. Each report captured the same essential detail. The scent trail did not fade gradually or disperse naturally. It ended abruptly and cleanly, as though cut off. Canine units remain one of the most reliable tools in wilderness searches, capable of following scent across water, over rock, and through shifting wind. Yet on Alder Ridge Trail, dogs behaved as if the scent ended in midair or ceased to exist beyond a narrow boundary. Handlers noted the odd uniformity across years, though none offered formal conclusions. The corridor continues to present this quiet resistance to canine tracking, a subtle, repeating refusal that adds to the growing record of small events that do not align with normal wilderness behavior. The objects left behind. Across all documented disappearances on Alder Ridge Trail, only a few personal belongings were ever recovered. These items, simple, ordinary, and easy to overlook, form one of the most puzzling aspects of the investigation. Their condition and placement remain consistent across cases, suggesting patterns that investigators have not been able to explain. Each object appeared clean, dry, unscuffed, and free of environmental wear, as though set gently in place rather than lost during movement or distress. The earliest recovered object belonged to biologist Karen Holt in 2006, her clipboard. It was found beside Pine Notch, lying at a slight angle on the bare soil. Rangers who reached the site noted that the ground around it showed no dents, drag marks, or scattered debris. Karen's handwritten note, "Wind changed at 11 to 14, sat at the top of the page. The writing was steady, suggesting she was not rushed or startled. The paper had no creases, moisture marks, or soil smudges. Searchers found no footprints around it. One ranger wrote in the log, "Clipboard appears placed, not dropped." The observation was brief, but it echoed across later cases. In 2011, the Connors brothers' packs were found on a northern overlook. Both bags sat side by side as though positioned carefully. Straps lay flat against the ground. Nothing inside was disturbed. Water bottles remained upright, notebooks clean, and snack wrappers untouched. No sign indicated the bags had been searched by animals. The soil beneath them was smooth, showing no scuff marks from being set down with force. A searcher wrote, "Symmetric placement unusual for accidental drop." Another noted, "No weather effect despite open ridge exposure." Investigators could not determine how two trained hikers, equipped for navigation, left essential gear without any sign of struggle. The next recovered item appeared in 2015 during the search for geologist Howard Lane. His jacket lay between two fallen logs, far north of the expected search zone. Despite resting on forest debris, the jacket remained dust-free and dry, even though a brief rainstorm had passed through the area 1 week earlier. The logs beneath it showed no compression marks. The oval-shaped soil depression nearby did not match Howard's body size or shape. The jacket fabric held no tears or stretching. Searchers examined the collar and sleeves for signs of animal contact, but found none. A ranger wrote, "Condition inconsistent with time outdoors." The only item associated with a sound report came from 2018, when photographer Maria Lopez's incident prompted a secondary sweep. Though Maria was not missing, rangers searched for any sign of disturbance in the area where she heard the low whistle. They found none. No objects were present, and the forest floor showed its usual undisturbed smoothness. The absence of trace became part of the pattern. Objects appeared only when associated with full disappearances, never near partial incidents. In 2021, during the search for forestry student Samuel Pierce, a rolled-up map was found inside a shallow hollow near the base of the ridge. The map's edges were crisp, no moisture had reached it. Researchers noted that the hollow's walls showed no scratch marks or soil slipping that would suggest the map fell in by accident. The paper held no fingerprints besides Samuel's known prints from earlier hikes. A ranger wrote, "Map appears staged in natural depression." The wording was careful, not speculative. The placement mirrored earlier items, neat, dry, unmarked. Across all these cases, one shared detail emerged. Recovered objects showed no sign of panic or damage. Clothing was not torn, paper was not wrinkled, packs were not emptied, equipment was not scattered. Every item suggested calm placement rather than hurried loss. Investigators reviewed environmental factors as well. They examined wind patterns that could have moved objects, but meteorological files noted no strong gusts on the days items were found. They considered the possibility of animals shifting belongings, yet no bite marks, claw marks, or soil disturbance indicated wildlife interaction. They tested for runoff patterns in heavy rain, but drainage models showed the areas remained stable, making water displacement unlikely. Search leaders also checked for human involvement. Could other hikers or unknown individuals have relocated these objects? Access logs showed minimal trail traffic during the disappearance windows. No prints from unfamiliar boots appeared in the vicinity. No tire marks showed on service roads. Investigators emphasized that none of the items showed signs of being carried, handled, or dropped multiple times. One detail became particularly notable. Every recovered object rested in an area characterized by the same environmental stillness documented in other chapters. Calm wind, flat soil, diffused sound conditions consistent with the broader atmospheric and acoustic anomalies recorded on the trail. Rangers also noted an absence of time decay. Items left outside, even for a few days, usually show early signs of wear fading, moisture absorption, dust accumulation. But the belongings on Alder Ridge appeared preserved, as though exposure had been shortened or interrupted. A ranger reviewing the 2015 jacket case commented, "Fabric should show early mildew. It does not." A similar comment appeared in the 2021 map analysis. No moisture penetration despite open terrain. Investigators re-examined each object multiple times. They photographed, measured, and catalogued details carefully. But the objects provided no footprints, no trail direction, no marks of struggle. They offered only stillness items placed in a way that did not align with normal hiking incidents. Over time, these belongings became quiet symbols within the case files. They reflected a pattern of interruption rather than accident, pause rather than movement. Objects left without context, without trace, and without the usual progression that search teams rely on to reconstruct missing person events. Alder Ridge Trail continues to yield objects in this manner, few in number, small in size, and consistent in condition. Each one adds a quiet piece to the pattern, raising questions that deepen the mystery rather than bring clarity. The technology that failed quietly. Modern hikers depend on devices that track movement, record location, and store digital traces. Phones, GPS units, radios, and action cameras create timelines that help investigators retrace steps when something goes wrong. But on Alder Ridge Trail, technology often failed not with sharp errors or dramatic malfunctions, but with quiet, clean breaks. Data stopped mid-function. Signals ended in perfect conditions. Batteries showed healthy charge one moment, then delivered no usable record the next. These failures were subtle enough that technicians could not attribute them to hardware defects or environmental interference. The first noted technological irregularity appeared in 2006 during the disappearance of biologist Karen Holt. Her GPS unit sent routine signals every 5 minutes. The last transmission came from Pine Notch at 11:12 a.m. The next expected signal, due at 11:17, never arrived. Technicians later reviewed the device. After it was retrieved from the search headquarters, its internal hardware showed no damage, no corrosion, and no firmware failure. The clock remained functional. The battery level indicated normal capacity. A technician wrote, "Signal termination clean, not degraded, no error code." Usually, lost GPS signals fade gradually or produce corrupted packets. Karen's simply stopped. During the 2009 search for retired ranger Stephen Collins, investigators examined his radio logs. Stephen maintained a well-oiled routine, often checking in with dispatch when hiking alone. His radio emitted no distress call. Reviewers scanned the recorded channels for interference, noise, static bursts, atmospheric distortion, blocked frequencies. None appeared. The channel remained clear throughout the morning. One reviewer wrote, "Radio silence uninterrupted, no pressure, anomalies." If Stephen encountered trouble, his radio did not register a single break, spike, or attempted transmission. Phone records from the Connors brothers in 2011 added another quiet anomaly. Their devices connected normally to the last available tower at 10:17 a.m. when Mark reported crossing the bridge. Signal strength was strong. Both phones maintained active standby status. At 10:23, Joseph transmitted his brief message about a cracking sound. Then both phones showed a sudden drop in outgoing and incoming activity. They did not lose service the way devices do when entering a dead zone. Instead, they remained connected without exchanging data. A telecommunications specialist reviewing the record wrote, "Signal channel open, user data silent." The phrasing suggested stillness rather than interruption. When geologist Howard Lane vanished in 2015, search teams examined his small field tablet, which he often used to photograph and log mineral formations. Logs showed 3 images taken between 8:59 a.m. and 9:05 a.m. The next expected entry, based on his normal 5-minute photography rhythm, should have appeared around 9:10. Instead, the device registered no further activity. The tablet still held half its battery when examined days later. Its internal clock remained synchronized. Photo files had no corruption, and location metadata attached to the last image was precise. A digital analyst wrote, "Process termination without system stress." The 2018 incident involving photographer Maria Lopez did not include a disappearance, but the digital sound recorder she carried produced a subtle clue. Maria kept her recorder running during nature walks. When rangers examined her device, they found that the whistle she described did not appear in the audio, but there was a quiet gap, 3 seconds of complete silence, exactly where she reported hearing the tone. Recordings typically capture ambient forest noise, even in quiet areas, insects, wind, distant birds, but the gap showed no waveform activity at all. A reviewer wrote, "Silence not natural, background noise absent." The note was included in the case file, even though Maria had not gone missing. Technology surrounding the 2021 disappearance of forestry student Samuel Pierce added the most detail. Samuel carried a modern smartphone with location logging enabled. His last recorded position matched his encounter with witness Peter Benson. The phone recorded stable signal until 9:31 a.m. At 9:32, location tracking froze. Battery level remained at 62%. Applications running in the background continued logging internal timestamps until 10:04, when they stopped abruptly. Device diagnostics showed no overheating, no crash, and no forced power off. The phone simply ceased recording external data. A technician analyzing the logs wrote, "Operation continued internally. External mapping ceased without error." Emergency radios used by search teams during Samuel's operation also recorded small anomalies. One ranger's radio log showed a brief gap, less than half a second of signal dropout, when he approached mile 2. The gap did not produce static or distortion. It appeared as a clean blank. Another ranger reported difficulty receiving a message from a colleague, even though both stood within line of sight. When they tested their units afterward, both radios functioned normally. These incidents were too small to classify as malfunctions, yet they mirrored past cases in their quiet precision. Technicians also reviewed data from wildlife cameras set along the trail in 2018 and 2019. One camera near the first ridge recorded normal footage for several days. Then, at 2:14 p.m. on July 9, it captured 3 frames of forest stillness before the file ended abruptly. No fragmenting or partial frames appeared. The next video clip did not begin until several hours later, showing normal operation. The device recorded no temperature spikes or memory errors. Another camera placed farther up the ridge displayed a similar gap 2 weeks later, an unaccounted pause, with no environmental event preceding it. In examining all the cases, technicians ruled out solar flares, atmospheric interference, magnetic anomalies, and hardware defects. None of the failures matched common patterns seen when devices malfunction under extreme cold, heat, or moisture. Instead, they resembled something simpler: clean interruptions, no drift, no fade, no corruption, just precise endings. These quiet failures mirrored other aspects of Alder Ridge Trail: the silence, the absence of disturbance, the unexplained stillness. Technology behaved normally everywhere, except inside the same narrow corridor. Devices that should have captured direction, movement, or final moments stopped short without warning, as though the events they were meant to record never reached them. The first unanswered report. Long before Alder Ridge Trail became associated with disappearances, a single report sat quietly in the Pine County Ranger archives filed in April 1998, 6 years before the first documented case. At the time, the entry attracted no attention. It described no emergency, no injury, and no criminal concern. Instead, it recounted a brief, uneventful moment on the trail, written by a man who simply felt something he could not explain. Only after the pattern of vanishings formed did investigators look back at this early note and realize it contained details that would reappear across later decades. The report came from a 4-year-old hiker named Leonard West, a schoolteacher from Idaho who often traveled across state lines to explore quiet, lesser-known trails. West had hiked Alder Ridge several times in the mid-1992s and considered it one of the easiest routes in the region. On the 23rd of April 1998, he arrived at the trailhead around 8:15 a.m., the same time window later associated with numerous incidents. Weather logs list the day as mild, with scattered clouds and calm wind. West's handwritten statement begins plainly: trail normal, light breeze, good visibility. He walked steadily toward the first ridge, recording no unusual activity until he reached a bend near a small stand of spruce, a location that later appeared repeatedly in canine reports and search logs. There, West stopped because something felt different. He wrote, "Air went still very suddenly. The wind, which had been light but continuous, stopped entirely. He expected it to return within a few moments, but it did not. Several minutes passed in silence." West later wrote that the only sound he heard was the faint creaking of a branch high above him. No birds called, no insects clicked. The stillness, he said, felt like a pause. He did not describe fear or panic, only that the forest seemed to hold its breath. After about 30 seconds, he heard a sound behind him, a short, sharp crack. He turned but saw nothing. The trees looked unchanged. The trail remained empty. The sound repeated once more, softer. He could not determine the source. West continued walking slowly, checking the forest to either side. He later noted, no movement in brush, no animals. He walked another 50 yards, but then stopped again, describing a faint sensation of pressure in his ears, as though the air density had shifted. When the sensation faded, the wind returned gently. Nothing else happened that morning. West completed the trail, returned to his car, and drove home. But the quiet strangeness lingered in his mind, prompting him to file a brief ranger contact form at the Pine County station. He marked the incident as non-urgent and left before speaking to any staff. His note ended with the line, "Perhaps nothing, but atmosphere unusual." The report was logged, but not investigated. No follow-up questions were asked. At the time, Alder Ridge had no recorded problems. The trail was considered stable, predictable, and safe. Staff placed the form in an archive drawer with other minor visitor notes, trail maintenance requests, wildlife sightings, weather comments. Nobody reviewed the file again for 6 years. In 2004, after Daniel Price vanished, investigators combed through older records to identify prior incidents. They discovered West's note and highlighted the sections describing sudden silence, cracking sounds, and still air. These details matched later witness accounts despite occurring years before the first disappearance. The file shows a ranger's handwritten margin note added that year. Matches 2004, worth review. But the review never advanced. When Price's search ended without findings, attention turned to other tasks. The pattern had not yet formed, and West's report remained an isolated curiosity. When biologist Karen Holt vanished in 2006, investigators revisited West's statement again. They noticed that West's sudden silence corresponded with Karen's final Jeeps moment, which showed her moving normally until an unexplained pause in data. A ranger circled West's phrase, "Air went still," and added a small question mark. The file was returned to storage. By 2009, after Stephen Collins's disappearance, investigators recognized that West had stood in nearly the same location, where several dogs later refused to continue their scent trails. His description of a cracking sound mirrored Joseph Connor's final radio transmission, Long Crack. A digital timestamp comparison performed years later showed that West, Price, and the Connors brothers all encountered their unexplained moments between 9:55 and 10:25 a.m., though on different years. Still, West's report remained only a fragment, nothing actionable, nothing conclusive. When investigators reanalyzed all Alder Ridge documentation in 2017, they created a timeline of atmospheric anomalies. They noticed that West's description of pressure changes matched later readings collected during a temperature layering study. His account of sound fading matched Maria Lopez's 3-second audio gap. His mention of absent wildlife aligned with multiple visitor journals across the 2010 seconds. The pattern became visible only in hindsight. In 2021, when forestry student Samuel Pierce vanished, the investigative team contacted West, now in his late 70s. They asked whether he could recall any further details from that morning in 1998. West said his memory was faint, but he remembered a specific impression. It felt like the trail didn't want sound. He explained that the quietness seemed intentional, not hostile, not threatening, but controlled. When asked to clarify, he said, "It was like walking into a room where someone had already decided it should stay silent." He reported no fear, only stillness. Investigators reviewed his original form once more. A ranger summarized it in a 2022 briefing. First recorded environmental anomaly at Alder Ridge, predating all disappearances. Sudden silence, isolated cracking sound, still air, no wildlife. West's report remains the earliest documented hint that Alder Ridge Trail behaved differently long before people started vanishing. It contains no dramatic details, no moment of danger, and no sighting of movement. Yet it mirrors nearly every anomaly recorded since. A quiet beginning to a trail that would later grow known for quiet endings. The corridor that never changed. By the time investigators compiled every disappearance, every anomaly, and every quiet contradiction surrounding Alder Ridge Trail, a single repeated truth emerged. Nothing on the trail behaved the way time and nature normally behave. The forest grew, yet it never showed the marks of growth. Weather shifted, yet it shifted unevenly. People passed through, yet their movement left no imprint. The trail appeared open, but something within it refused to record motion, sound, or direction. Across nearly 20 years, the corridor remained still unchanged, unmarked, and strangely consistent. Search leaders often spoke about this corridor as if it were a physical space with precise edges. The anomalies, silent air pockets, cooling bands, scent breaks, device failures, always aligned within the first 3 miles. Outside that zone, the forest acted normally. Leaves swayed. Wildlife passed through. Weather followed predictable patterns. GPS units kept steady logs. Dogs tracked confidently. But inside the corridor, everything seemed paused, as if the environment accepted presence but rejected continuity. In the final consolidated review conducted in early 2023, investigators placed every anomaly onto a single map. Each point where a dog refused to move, where a device stopped recording, where an object was found without environmental wear sat along a narrow, curving arc that began near the creek bridge and ended just past Pine Notch. The arc did not match a geological boundary, watershed line, or known fault. It resembled something else, a threshold. A ranger quietly remarked during the mapping session, "It's like a space that stays the same no matter how many times you walk into it." When technicians reviewed the environmental data, they noted an absence of accumulation. Sound profiles remained unchanged from year to year. Temperature irregularities appeared and vanished without building into patterns. Even fog behaved identically across seasons, lifting quickly near the same bend each time, despite different starting conditions. One analyst wrote, "No drift, no long-term shift, corridor resets." The language was cautious, but the implication was clear. Alder Ridge did not evolve in the way natural spaces typically evolve. A retired ranger described a moment during the 2015 search that investigators often revisited. He stood on the trail alone, just after sunrise, reviewing ground conditions when he noticed something unusual. "I realized I'd stood in that same place 10 years earlier, and it looked exactly the same. Not similar exact. Fallen needles rested in the same smooth layer. The moss showed the same unbroken patchwork. Even the angle of light filtering between the trees seemed unchanged." He wondered how many cycles of wind and rain it would take to produce differences elsewhere, and why this corridor resisted them. In 2021, a forestry consultant conducted a canopy edge study along the trail. Tree cores indicated normal aging, but the understory growth told a different story. Many plants showed patterns inconsistent with their expected life cycles. Some appeared in early growth stage despite the canopy suggesting decades of shade. Others showed no signs of seasonal stress. When asked whether this could be explained by soil composition or microclimate, the consultant shook his head. "The forest is aging," he said, "but the ground below it is not." Digital analysts reviewing map discrepancies found something similar. Despite the hand-drawn shifts and printed misalignments across 4 decades, the trail itself, when walked, had never physically moved. Soil compression, root exposure, and rock placement all indicated the same usage path, stretching back far beyond the first official survey. Yet no 2 maps agreed fully on that path. One analyst summarized the finding in a short note: "Trail consistent, records inconsistent." It was as if the land remained fixed while human attempts to document it shifted around it. What puzzled investigators most was the lack of escalation. Natural mysteries often accumulate more detail over time, more debris, more patterns, more environmental clues. Alder Ridge did the opposite. The longer investigators studied it, the more the corridor resisted detail. The silence deepened, data thinned, and the trail offered fewer impressions of movement year after year. Even the cases themselves showed no progression. Every disappearance mirrored the first, Calm departure, normal conditions, abrupt vanishing, no trace. In the final report's closing section, a ranger wrote a line that others hesitated to include, but ultimately approved. The trail behaves as though something is missing, not someone. She explained the statement in later interviews. On Alder Ridge, she said, "Things do not go wrong. They simply do not continue. The environment absorbs motion without responding. It records presence without recording passage." Another ranger described it differently. "It's not that the hikers didn't leave clues, it's that the trail didn't take any. The corridor refuses accumulation of sound, of scent, of footprints, of data. Whether walked once or walked hundreds of times by search teams, it remains unchanged." Investigators debated metaphors, null zone, quiet seam, static corridor, but none captured the full stillness of the place. Late in 2022, during an off-season patrol, 2 rangers walked Alder Ridge at dawn. They noticed frost on the ground near the parking lot, but not a trace of it past the first bend. The air, though cold, felt lighter inside the corridor. One ranger bent to touch the soil. It felt cool but dry, untouched by the frost line. They stood in silence for a moment before continuing. Later that morning, one of them wrote in the patrol log, "Trail feels like it's holding everything at a distance." That line became the quiet anchor of the final evaluation. Alder Ridge Trail remains open. Hikers continue to visit. Some walk the first mile and turn back without knowing they've stepped into a place that does not behave like the forest around it. Others move deeper, unaware of the corridor's stillness or the quiet threshold mapped by investigators. There is no warning sign at the trailhead, no ranger speech, no official advisory. Only the forest calm, unchanged, and waiting in the way it always has. Whatever happens in the corridor happens without struggle, without sound, and without trace. And the trail, unchanged over decades, receives each step the same way. Without keeping it, you've now seen how Alder Ridge Trail hides its mystery in plain sight, a corridor where scent trails stop, devices fail, and the forest remains unchanged year after year. The disappearances offer no turning point, no visible struggle, and no pattern that aligns with ordinary wilderness logic. Yet hikers continue to enter the trail, unaware of the silence and stillness recorded again and again. If you want deeper investigations into other wilderness anomalies, forgotten case files, and quiet locations where the official record falls silent, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell so you never miss a new chapter in this series. Share your thoughts below. Have you experienced similar silence on a trail or sensed a place behaving out of rhythm? Your insight helps guide future episodes. Thank you for watching, and stay aware on the paths you walk next.